You know that feeling when the hairs on the back of your neck stand up, alerting you to danger before your brain even processes what is happening? That is exactly how my Tuesday started. It was supposed to be a quiet afternoon. Just me, my lukewarm cup of Earl Grey tea, and the crossword puzzle that I have been trying to finish for 3 days. I was sitting in my favorite armchair, the one with the velvet upholstery that has worn thin on the armrests from years of use. This chair sits in a little alcove just off the living room, kind of hidden by a large bookshelf filled with my late husband Arthur's old encyclopedias. If you don't look closely, you wouldn't even know someone was sitting there, especially since I had not turned on the reading lamp yet. My 2 children, Jason and Brenda, had come over for a surprise visit. Usually, a surprise visit means they need money, or they need me to babysit Brenda's chaotic terrier, Buster. But today they came without the dog and they did not ask for cash immediately. They told me to go rest and take a load off, while they made some coffee in the kitchen. Felt nice, honestly. For a brief moment I allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they were actually concerned about their 72-year-old mother. I closed my eyes, listening to the clinking of spoons against ceramic mugs coming from the kitchen. But then the voices moved. They walked from the kitchen into the living room. They must have assumed I went upstairs to my bedroom to nap like I usually do around 2 in the afternoon. But I hadn't. I was right there in the alcove, frozen, holding my breath as their hushed whispers turned into a conversation that made my blood run cold. "Look, the market is peaking right now, Jace." Brenda's voice was sharp, lacking that sugary sweetness she uses when she talks to me. "If we list it next week, we could get a cash offer by the end of the month. I already spoke to a guy." I know, Jason replied, sounding impatient. "But what about Mom? She's going to flip out. You know how she is about this place. She still talks to Dad's urn on the mantelpiece." "She's losing it, Jason," Brenda scoffed. "Did you see her today? She forgot where she put her glasses again. It's only a matter of time before she leaves the stove on and burns the whole place down. We're doing her a favor. The Green Meadows facility has a room opening up on the first. It is perfect. Small, manageable, safe." I gripped the armrests of my chair so hard my knuckles turned white. Green Meadows? That place was a glorified warehouse for the elderly. It was where people went to stare at walls until they expired. And they were discussing it like they were deciding where to go for lunch. Before I tell you what they said next, because it gets so much worse, I want you to pause for a second. I need to know I'm not alone in dealing with crazy family drama. Drop a comment down below telling me where you are watching this video from and what time it is right now. I am curious to see who else is up late listening to this nightmare. Okay, so back to the living room. I sat there, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I wanted to jump up and scream at them. I wanted to throw my cold tea in Jason's face. But something stopped me. Maybe it was fear, or maybe it was the ghost of Arthur whispering in my ear to wait. Arthur was always the strategic one. He played chess, I played checkers. He always told me to listen first and act second. So I stayed quiet. I made myself as small as possible in that velvet chair. "I checked the comps in the neighborhood," Jason said, his voice lowering to a conspiratorial murmur. "With the renovations Dad did before he passed, this place is worth at least $600,000. Maybe more if we stage it right. That's 300 grand each, Bren. Do you know what that would do for my debt? And for my renovation," Brenda added quickly. "Plus, we won't have to worry about her calling us every weekend to fix a leaky faucet or change a light bulb. The nursing home handles all that. It is a win-win. A win-win. That is what they called displacing their mother from the home she had lived in for 40 years. The home where I bandaged their scraped knees. The home where I hosted 16 Thanksgiving dinners. The home where I held Arthur's hand as he took his last breath in the master bedroom. To them it wasn't a home. It was a giant piggy bank they were itching to smash open. They started walking around the room and I could hear them critiquing my things. "This old rug has to go," Brenda said, the sound of her heels clicking on the hardwood floor getting closer to my hiding spot. "And all these knickknacks. We need to declutter. Make it look modern. Buyers hate clutter." "We can get a dumpster next week," Jason suggested. "Tell her we are doing a spring cleaning to help her out. By the time she realizes we are tossing the good stuff, it will be too late." I felt a tear roll down my cheek, hot and angry. They weren't just planning to sell the house. They were planning to erase me. They wanted to strip away my history, my comfort, and my dignity, all so they could pay off their bad decisions and renovate their kitchens. I realized then that the children I raised, The boy who used to bring me dandelions and the girl who used to braid my hair were gone. In their place stood two vultures in designer clothes, circling a carcass that wasn't even dead yet. I heard them moving back toward the hallway. "Let's go tell her we're heading out," Jason said. "Don't say anything about the listing agent yet. We need to get her to sign the power of attorney first. Tell her it's for medical emergencies." "I know how to handle her, Jason," Brenda snapped. "Just look sad and talk about how worried we are about her health. She eats that stuff up." They walked past the alcove, completely oblivious to my presence, and headed for the stairs to wake me up. I waited until their footsteps hit the first landing before I quietly stood up. My legs were shaking, but my mind was suddenly crystal clear. They thought I was a confused old lady who forgot where her glasses were. They thought I was weak. They thought I was an easy target. I wiped the tear from my face and took a deep breath. They were about to find out that Evelyn wasn't ready for the nursing home just yet. If they wanted to play games, fine. But they forgot that I was the one who taught them how to play. I hurried back into the kitchen and poured my cold tea down the sink, grabbing a fresh mug just as they came back down the stairs, looking confused that I wasn't in bed. The war had officially begun right there in my kitchen. "Mom, we thought you were upstairs napping," Jason said, his voice cracking slightly as he rounded the corner into the kitchen. He looked like a kid who had been caught with his hand in the cookie jar, except this time the cookie jar was my entire life savings and the house I planned to die in. I stood there by the sink, drying a mug with a calmness I certainly did not feel. "Oh, I just came down for some fresh water," I lied smoothly. "I must have missed you two coming in. Did you say something about a surprise?" Brenda exchanged a quick, panicked look with Jason. I could practically see the gears turning in her head as she recalibrated her strategy. She smoothed down her expensive silk blouse, paid for, I suspect, by her third credit card refinance this year, and put on that patronizing smile she reserves for toddlers and the elderly. "No surprise, Mom," Brenda cooed, walking over to give me a stiff side hug. "We were just worried about you. You know, living in this big old house all by yourself. It's a lot of work to maintain, isn't it?" "It keeps me active," I replied, turning away to fill the kettle so she wouldn't see the disgust in my eyes. "Arthur always said a house needs people to keep it alive." "Right, Dad," Jason muttered, leaning against the counter. He pulled a folded document out of his jacket pocket. My heart skipped a beat. This was it. The power of attorney they had whispered about in the living room. "Speaking of Dad, Mom, we were thinking, with your memory slipping a bit lately, like with the glasses today, it might be smart to sign some paperwork. Just standard stuff. Medical emergencies. So we can help you if, God forbid, something happens." I stared at the paper. It looked innocent enough, just black ink on white pulp, but I knew it was a bear trap. If I signed that, they would have control over my finances, my medical decisions, and ultimately, this house. They could check me into Green Meadows tomorrow and sell the house on Friday. "I'll look at it later," I said, brushing past him to open the fridge. "My memory is fine, Jason. I found my glasses, by the way. They were on the bookshelf next to Dad's encyclopedias. Right where I left them when I sat down to do my crossword." I emphasized the word bookshelf just enough to see Jason flinch. He knew the alcove was right there. He was wondering if I had been there the whole time. But he didn't dare ask. They were too cowardly to confront me directly. They preferred the boiling the frog method, slowly taking over my life until I didn't realize I was cooked. After 10 minutes of excruciating small talk, where they scanned my kitchen like appraisers rather than children, they finally left. I locked the deadbolt behind them, engaging both the handle lock and the top chain. It felt symbolic. I was locking the enemy out. I walked into the living room and stood in front of the fireplace. Above the mantel hangs a portrait of Arthur. He passed away 5 years ago, but in moments like this, I miss him so much it feels like a physical ache in my chest. Arthur was a man of few words, but he was sharp as a tack. He was a contract lawyer for 30 years, and he saw the world in terms of liability and risk. I remember the night before he went into surgery for the last time. He made me sit down at the kitchen table, holding my hands in his rough, callous palms. "Evie," he had said, his voice serious. "I love our kids. I do. But you and I both know they have an appetite for things they haven't earned." I had tried to hush him then. "Don't talk like that, Artie. They're good kids." "They are grown adults who still act like kids," he corrected me. "Jason takes shortcuts. Brenda spends money to impress people she doesn't like. When I'm gone, this house is going to look like a giant dollar sign to them. You have to promise me you will protect yourself. I looked at his painted eyes in the portrait. You were right, you old grump, I whispered to the empty room. You were absolutely right. It hurts to admit that your children are vultures. You spend your life raising them, wiping their tears, teaching them right from wrong, and sacrificing your own dreams so they can have better ones. I remember skipping vacations so we could pay for Jason's hockey camp. I remember driving a beat-up sedan for a decade so we could afford Brenda's tuition at that private arts college she dropped out of after 2 years. And this is the repayment? A plot hatched in whispers while I sit 10 feet away? Jason has always been the idea guy, who never executes. He has started 5 businesses in the last 10 years. A landscaping company, a crypto mining rig in his garage, a dropshipping store selling cheap sunglasses, and every single one of them failed, requiring a small loan from me to bail him out. He sees this house as the capital for his next big failure. And Brenda? Brenda is worse because she pretends to be successful. She drives a leased luxury car she can't afford and lives in a condo with HOA fees higher than my social security check. She sees this house as her ticket out of debt, a way to maintain the illusion of her high-status life without actually working for it. They didn't see the height chart penciled onto the doorframe of the pantry, marking their growth from toddlers to teenagers. They didn't see the rose bushes in the backyard that Arthur planted for our 25th anniversary. They just saw square footage. They saw granite countertops and hardwood floors. They saw a quick flip. I walked over to the bookshelf where I had been hiding earlier. I pulled out the 3rd volume of the encyclopedia set, C to D. Behind the books, there was a small safe installed into the wall. Arthur had put it there years ago. He told me that if the day ever came when I felt backed into a corner, the answer was inside that safe. I hadn't opened it since his funeral. I hadn't needed to. I thought we were a family. I thought family looked out for each other. But as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the living room floor that my children wanted to rip up, I realized that the only person looking out for me was the man watching from the portrait above the fireplace. My hands were trembling as I dialed the combination. Left to 12. Right to 25. Left to 6. The heavy click of the latch opening echoed in the silent house. It sounded like a gunshot. I wasn't just a helpless old lady anymore. I was Arthur's wife, and I was about to remind them exactly what that meant. 3 days passed. 3 days of me tiptoeing around my own house, waiting for the other shoe to drop. I spent the time rereading Arthur's documents from the safe, memorizing every single word until they were burned into my retina. I knew my ace in the hole was solid, but I had to wait for the perfect moment to play it. If I showed my hand too early, they might find a loophole or worse, try to have me declared mentally incompetent just to bypass the paperwork. I had to let them think they were winning. Saturday morning arrived with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. I was in the kitchen buttering a piece of toast when I heard car doors slamming in the driveway. Not just one car but 2. I peeked through the sheer curtains of the front window. Jason's beat-up sedan was there, parked crookedly on the grass, which annoyed me to no end. Beside it was a flashy, silver Mercedes convertible that looked completely out of place in our modest suburban driveway. I didn't even have time to unlock the door before they were pounding on it. I opened it to find Jason and Brenda flanking a man who looked like he had been manufactured in a factory that produced nothing but cheap cologne and expensive suits. He was wearing a navy blazer that was too tight, white teeth that were too bright, and he was holding a leather portfolio like it was the nuclear football. "Mom, this is Marcus," Brenda said, pushing past me into the foyer without asking. "He is the top realtor in the county. He specializes in distressed properties." Distressed. I repeated, clutching my robe tighter around myself. "My house is not distressed, Brenda. I just had the gutters cleaned last week." Marcus flashed a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He looked at me for exactly 1 second before his gaze drifted over my shoulder to the staircase. "Charming," he said in a tone that clearly meant garbage. "Great potential for an open concept if we knock out that load-bearing wall. The entryway is a bit dark, but with some recessed lighting and gray laminate flooring, we could really modernize the flow." "We can discuss the renovations later," Jason interrupted, hauling a large cardboard box into the hallway. He kicked the door shut behind him with his foot. "Mom, sit down. We need to talk." They herded me into the living room, my living room, like I was a wayward sheep. Marcus remained standing, pacing around the room, tapping on the walls and making notes on his iPad. It was infuriating. He was mentally tearing down the home I had built over 40 years, turning my memories into demolition debris. Brenda sat next to me on the sofa and placed a glossy folder on the coffee table. On the cover was a picture of smiling elderly people playing checkers in a sunroom. Green Meadows Senior Living, the bold font proclaimed. "We made a deposit for you this morning," Brenda said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "They have a bed opening up on Tuesday. It is a lovely room. It overlooks the parking lot, the garden. And they have bingo 3 nights a week. You love bingo." "I hate bingo. I have always hated bingo. Arthur loved it and I went with him because I loved him." Brenda would know that if she had paid attention to anything other than her phone for the last 20 years. "I am not going to a nursing home," I said, keeping my voice steady, though my hands were shaking in my lap. "I am perfectly capable of taking care of myself. I made breakfast this morning. I pay my own bills." "But for how long?" Jason interjected, leaning forward. "You are forgetting things, Mom. The glasses? The other day you didn't even hear us come in. You were just staring at the wall in the alcove. It's dangerous. What if you fall down the stairs? What if you leave the gas on?" "We are doing this because we love you," Brenda added, placing her hand on mine. Her palm was cold and clammy. "We can't watch you deteriorate in this big empty house. It's selfish of you to make us worry like this." Selfish. The word hung in the air like toxic smoke. I looked at Marcus, who was now measuring the fireplace mantel where Arthur's urn sat. He actually moved the urn to the side to get his tape measure flush against the wood. That small act of disrespect made my vision blur with rage. "So, the plan is to ship me off to Green Meadows on Tuesday and sell the house?" I asked, looking from Jason to Brenda. "The market is hot, Evelyn," Marcus piped up, finally addressing me by my first name as if we were peers. "We have a cash buyer lined up. A developer. He wants to close fast. No inspection, no contingencies. He just wants the land. He is offering top dollar, but we need to sign the listing agreement today to lock him in. He walks on Monday if we don't have a signature." "A developer?" I asked. "So they are going to tear it down?" "It's progress, Mom," Jason said, shrugging. "Who cares what happens to the bricks and wood once you are safe in the facility? The money from the sale will pay for your care. It's expensive, you know. Brenda and I can't afford to pay for it out of pocket." Of course. The money wasn't for them, it was for me. They were spinning it so they looked like martyrs. They would sell my house, shove me in a cheap room and pocket the difference, which I estimated to be about $400,000. "I'm not signing anything," I said, standing up. "Get out of my house. All of you." Brenda's face hardened. The mask of the concerned daughter slipped, revealing the desperate, greedy woman underneath. "You don't have a choice, Mom. We spoke to Dr. Henderson. We told him about your memory lapses. We are filing for emergency guardianship on Monday morning. If you don't sign these papers voluntarily today, the court will make you do it next week. And if we have to go through the courts, we might just pick a cheaper nursing home. One without a garden view." It was a bluff. I knew it was a bluff. Dr. Henderson had given me a clean bill of health 2 months ago. But the sheer cruelty of the threat took my breath away. They were willing to declare me insane just to get their hands on this money. Marcus stepped forward, clicking a fancy gold pen. "Look, Evelyn, let's make this easy. Just sign the listing agreement. The buyer's lawyer is already drafting the transfer documents. He just needs to verify the deed and get the signature. You sign now, you move Tuesday, and everyone is happy." I looked at the pen. Then I looked at the fireplace where Arthur's urn had been shoved aside. A developer. They were going to bulldoze the rose bushes. They were going to crush the pantry door with the height chart. "Fine," I said softly, letting my shoulders slump in defeat. "If the buyer is already drafting the papers, I suppose there is no point in fighting." Jason and Brenda exchanged a look of pure triumph. They thought they had broken me. "But," I added, raising a finger, "I won't sign with you bullying me. If this buyer is so serious, tell his lawyer to bring the paperwork here on Monday. I want to see everything official. I want to see the deed transfer papers myself before I sign away my life." "Monday is fine," Marcus said, checking his watch. "The buyer's attorney is a shark. He checks everything twice. He'll have the title search done and the contract ready by noon Monday. We sign then." "Good," I said. "Bring the lawyer. Bring the papers. And bring that brochure." They left thinking they had won. They thought I was surrendering. They had no idea that by demanding the lawyer and the official deed review, I had just set the trap that would snap their necks. Monday morning arrived with a gray, overcast sky that matched the mood inside my house perfectly. Or rather, it matched my mood. Jason and Brenda, on the other hand, were practically vibrating with excitement. They had arrived at 9 o'clock sharp, bringing donuts and coffee, acting like we were having a family celebration instead of a hostile takeover. They had already moved several boxes of my personal belongings into the garage, pre-packing for my move to Green Meadows the next day. I watched them from the kitchen island sipping my tea, letting them believe they were in control. At noon the doorbell rang. It was Marcus, the pushy realtor, accompanied by a man who looked like he sued nuns for a living. This was Mr. Sterling, the buyer's lawyer. He was a stark contrast to Marcus. Where Marcus was all flash and cheap cologne, Sterling was ice cold. He wore a charcoal suit that cost more than my first car, and he carried a briefcase that looked heavy enough to contain a body. He didn't smile. He didn't accept the coffee Brenda offered. He just walked to the dining room table, sat down and opened his briefcase. "Let's get this over with," Sterling said, his voice gravelly and devoid of emotion. "My client wants to break ground on the demolition by the 1st of the month. We need the title transfer signed and notarized today." Jason and Brenda sat opposite him, practically drooling. Marcus hovered behind them, calculating his commission on a calculator app on his phone. I sat at the head of the table, Arthur's seat. I had dressed up for the occasion in my best Sunday blazer and the pearl necklace Arthur gave me for our 30th anniversary. If I was going to war, I was going to look the part. Sterling spread the documents out on the mahogany table. The stack was an inch thick. "Standard sale agreement," he droned. "Waiver of inspection. Cash transfer details. And here is the deed transfer." He slid a paper toward me. "Sign here, Mrs. Evelyn. And here." Jason uncapped a pen and tried to shove it into my hand. "Here you go, Mom. Just sign it so we can get you lunch." "Hold on," I said, pushing the pen away. I looked at Sterling. "You said you are thorough, Mr. Sterling. Did you check the title history?" Sterling looked annoyed. "Of course. My paralegals ran the search this morning. Everything is clear. The house is in your name and your late husband's name. With his death certificate, which your son provided, you are the sole owner. It is a standard transfer." "Is it?" I asked, locking eyes with him. Because Arthur was a contract lawyer. He didn't do anything standard. He amended the deed 10 years ago when he got sick. "Did your paralegals catch the 2015 addendum?" Sterling paused. His hand hovered over the paperwork. He frowned, pulling a tablet from his bag and tapping on the screen furiously. The silence in the room stretched thin. Brenda looked at Jason, confused. Jason looked at Marcus. Marcus stopped smiling. "There is a flag here in the county digital abstract," Sterling muttered, more to himself than us. "Reference to an attached schedule regarding survivorship rights and usage restrictions. But the digital scan is corrupted. It just says, see original instrument. Fit." He looked up, his eyes narrowing. "I cannot close this deal without seeing the full text of that addendum. If there is a restriction on the land use, my client needs to know before he buys it to tear it down. Where is the original deed? The physical copy with the wet signatures?" Jason laughed nervously. "Oh, come on. It's just some old paperwork. Probably a typo. Can't we just sign?" "Absolutely not," Sterling snapped, slamming the folder shut. "My client is a commercial developer. If there is a covenant preventing demolition or commercial zoning, this land is useless to him. I need the original deed. Now." Panic instantly erupted. Jason jumped up. "It's in the office. I saw a box of Dad's old papers." "Go get it," Brenda screeched, her composure cracking. "Hurry up." For the next 20 minutes, I sat calmly at the table while my children tore the house apart. I heard them dumping drawers out in the home office. I heard books hitting the floor. I heard them cursing at each other. "It's not here," Jason yelled from the other room, sounding frantic. "It's just tax returns and old manuals." "Check the basement," Brenda yelled back. "Check the filing cabinet." They were sweating, their faces red and blotchy. They were watching their $300,000 paydays evaporate into thin air. Marcus was pacing the dining room, wiping sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. "Mrs. Evelyn," he said, his voice trembling. "Do you know where it might be?" If we don't find it, the deal falls through. The buyer walks. Oh dear, I said, taking a slow sip of my tea. That would be a shame, wouldn't it? After you went to all the trouble of booking that room at Green Meadows. Sterling checked his watch. I have a 2 o'clock court appearance. You have 5 minutes to produce the document or I am leaving and the offer is rescinded. Jason ran back into the dining room, his hair a mess. Mom, think. Where did Dad keep the important stuff? Please. We need this. We need this. I corrected him. Or you need this? We are doing this for you. Brenda screamed, losing all pretense of kindness. Just tell us where the damn paper is. I set my teacup down on the saucer with a definitive clink. The sound echoed in the silent room. I looked at them, really looked at them. They were desperate, greedy, and pathetic. And they had walked right into the trap Arthur and I had set years ago. It is in the wall safe, I said quietly. Behind the encyclopedia set. Volume C to D. Jason's eyes widened. He didn't even know we had a wall safe. He scrambled toward the living room, nearly tripping over the rug he hated so much. I heard the books tumble to the floor, followed by the beep 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 of him trying to open it. It's locked, he yelled. What's the combination? I'll do it, I said, standing up slowly. I walked into the living room with Brenda, Marcus, and Sterling trailing behind me like a procession. I pushed Jason aside. I spun the dial. Left to 12. Right to 25. Left to 6. The safe clicked open. Inside there was a single thick envelope made of yellowed manila paper. I pulled it out. It felt heavy in my hand. The weight of justice. Here, I said, turning to face them. I didn't hand it to Jason. I handed it directly to Mr. Sterling. The original deed with the 2015 addendum signed by Arthur and myself. Sterling took the envelope. He adjusted his glasses and pulled out the document. The paper crinkled loudly. Jason and Brenda leaned in, their breaths held, expecting to see a minor zoning issue they could bribe their way around. They had smiles on their faces again, thinking the crisis was averted. They had no idea that the words on that page were about to destroy their entire plan. The silence in the living room was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop on the hardwood floors that Brenda was so desperate to rip out. Mr. Sterling, the shark of a lawyer who had been ready to bulldoze my life 10 minutes ago, was now staring at the document in his hands with an expression that shifted from annoyance to grudging respect. He adjusted his glasses, squinted at the fine print, and then flipped the page to check the signatures. Well, Sterling finally said, letting out a dry, humorless chuckle. This changes things. This changes absolutely everything. What? Jason demanded, his voice shrill with panic. It's just a standard deed, right? Just tell us where she needs to sign so we can get the wire transfer. Sterling ignored him. He looked up at me, a strange glint in his eye. Mrs. Evelyn, your late husband. He was Arthur Miller, the contract attorney for the city planning board, wasn't he? He was, I replied, standing tall with my hands clasped in front of me. And he hated loopholes. Sterling nodded slowly. It shows. This isn't just a deed restriction. This is what we in the legal world call a poison pill life estate. He turned the document around so Jason and Brenda could see the paragraph he had highlighted with his finger. Clause 4, Section B, Sterling read aloud, his voice echoing in the room. The property located at 42 Oak Street is held in life estate by Evelyn Miller. No sale, transfer, lien, or encumbrance may be placed on this property without the life tenant's voluntary written consent, witnessed by a court-appointed official, not a notary public. So, Brenda scoffed, crossing her arms. We'll get a court official. Mom will sign. We can convince her. I'm not finished, Sterling cut her off, his voice sharp. Here is the part that your father added in 2015. Listen closely. Furthermore, should any heir, successor, or interested party attempt to coerce the life tenant, or attempt to declare the life tenant incompetent for the purpose of forcing a sale of this property, such action shall immediately trigger the revocation of remainder interest. Jason blinked, confused. Revocation of what? Speak English. Sterling looked at them with pure pity. It means, you idiots, that the moment you try to force a sale or question her mental health to get this house, you are automatically disinherited from the property. If this house is sold or if you try to force a sale, the ownership interest doesn't go to you. According to this clause, The remainder interest automatically transfers to. Sterling squinted at the bottom of the page. The St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital Trust. The color drained from Jason's face so fast I thought he was going to faint. Brenda's mouth fell open, her expensive lipstick looking like a smudge on a clown's face. You lose the house? Jason stammered. If we sell it, the money goes to charity? Every single penny, Sterling confirmed, packing the document back into the envelope and sliding it across the table to me. Your father made this deed ironclad. He anticipated exactly what you two were trying to do. If you had filed that guardianship paperwork on Monday like you planned, you would have triggered the clause immediately. As it stands, simply listing the property without her consent might have already put you on thin ice. Sterling stood up and snapped his briefcase shut. My client withdraws his offer. We don't touch properties with contested life estates. It's a litigation nightmare. Mrs. Evelyn, you have a lovely home. I suggest you keep it. He walked out the front door without another word. Marcus, the sweaty realtor, looked between me and my children, realized his commission just evaporated, and muttered a quick, sorry for the inconvenience before sprinting out the door after the lawyer. And then it was just the three of us. The air was thick with the smell of defeat. Jason collapsed onto the sofa, the one he wanted to throw in a dumpster. He put his head in his hands. I owed the loan sharks 40 grand by Friday, he whispered, his voice breaking. I told them the money was coming. Mom, they're going to break my legs. Brenda was pacing, hyperventilating. My renovation. The contractor already started demolition on my kitchen. I can't pay him. He's going to put a lien on my condo. Mom, you have to help us. You can't let us drown like this. I looked at them. Really looked at them. For years I would have opened my checkbook. I would have refinanced the house. I would have sacrificed my peace for their comfort. But today, looking at the people who had plotted to put me in a warehouse so they could cash out my life, I felt something inside me shift. The guilt was gone. In its place was a cold, hard resolve. I suggest you get jobs, I said calmly. What? Brenda shrieked, spinning around. That's it? You're just going to let us lose everything. You tried to take my everything, I replied, my voice raising just enough to silence her. You came into my house, ate my food, and planned to lock me away so you could steal the one thing your father left to keep me safe. You didn't care if I was lonely. You didn't care if I was scared. You only cared about the money. I walked to the front door and held it open. The gray light of the afternoon spilled into the hallway. Get out, I said. Mom, please, Jason begged, tears streaming down his face. We're your kids. Then start acting like it, I said. But do it from a distance. Until you can come to this house without looking at the price tag on the walls, you are not welcome here. Take your boxes. Take your schemes. And get out. They left. It took them 10 minutes to drag their pre-packed boxes back to their cars. They cried, they begged, they threatened, but I stood in the doorway like a statue until their taillights disappeared around the corner. When they were gone, I locked the door. Then I engaged the deadbolt. Then the chain. I walked back into the living room. It was quiet again. My chair was still there in the alcove. Arthur's encyclopedias were a bit messy on the floor, so I knelt down and stacked them back onto the shelf, hiding the safe once more. I picked up the picture of Arthur from the floor where Jason had dropped it. The glass wasn't cracked. He was still smiling, that knowing, crooked smile. You knew, didn't you? I whispered to the photo, wiping a speck of dust from the frame. You knew they would try it. I placed him back on the mantel, right in the center where he belonged. That evening, I made myself a fresh cup of Earl Grey. I sat in my velvet armchair, turned on the reading lamp, and finally finished my crossword puzzle. The answer to 12 down was sanctuary. 7 letters. It fit perfectly. My children are currently dealing with their own messes. Jason had to sell his car and get a job at a warehouse to pay off his debts. Brenda is being sued by her contractor and had to move into a smaller apartment. They call me sometimes, usually to apologize or to test the waters. I answer, but the conversations are short. I love them, I always will, but I love myself enough now to know that I don't have to set myself on fire to keep them warm. I still live in the house on Oak Street. The roses are blooming beautifully this year, and the height chart is still on the pantry door. It's my house. It's my history. And thanks to Arthur, it is my fortress. And to anyone out there thinking about taking advantage of their elderly parents, just remember, we taught you how to use a spoon. We taught you how to walk. And if you push us too far, we can still teach you a lesson you will never, ever forget. Thank you for listening to this story. If you enjoyed seeing karma hit exactly where it hurts, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you want more stories about entitled families getting what they deserve, subscribe and turn on notifications. Drop a comment below. Do you think I was too harsh on them, or did they get exactly what they deserved? Let me know your thoughts. See you in the next story.